Okay, so welcome all. Hope you're all having a wonderful day of, sorry, I've got more people joining in. Wonderful day of very stimulating discussions and practices. I'll have to bear with me, I'm a little bit new to Zoom. Okay. Welcome all to the session. I'm Darin Gibbs. I'm a clinical somatic educator based in Pembrokeshire. I've also taught yoga for 20 years, but clinical somatics is my main line of inquiry. I'm trained in the tradition of Dr. Thomas Hanna, and I'll pop some resources up later for you to further explore his work. What we'll be exploring today is some of the common reflexive patterns that we use in clinical somatics, and explore how to employ them and use them in a meditation setting. And that will become, I won't explain too much now, I'll sort of explain as we go along. I'm not sure whether anybody's got an existing meditation practice, and it doesn't really matter whether you have or you haven't. And what we cover won't, if you have got an existing practice, what we cover won't conflict with it in any way. It will just be another thing to explore. So the way we'll explore things, we'll explore some movements and patterns in standing initially, then we'll transfer those into sitting in a seated context, and then we'll integrate those into a meditational context at the end, and then there'll be plenty of time for feedback and questions at the end. So that all sound good? Right. I'm loving these virtual thumbs up. Okay, was there anything else I wanted to say? No, if there's one hope that I'd like for you to take away from the session, is that you've got another tool, another lens to be able to view things with, that maybe is either a different version of what you've considered before, or maybe it's brand new. So we'll see how we go. Okay, so has everybody got a chair handy for later on, rather than just a comfy sofa? Don't want anybody getting too comfy and falling asleep on me. Okay. Before we stand up, what I'd like you to do is, just for 10 or 15 seconds, have a little check-in, just to notice if there's any sensations you can feel now. And it might be tensions, might be comfort, might be discomfort, it might be a full belly after a big lunch, whatever you're feeling. Just starting to tune in a little. And then take a nice breath and a sigh, and notice if anything softens with the sigh. Take another one. Notice if anything softens. If anything softens, it means that something was a little tight, maybe you weren't aware of. And this time, as you take a nice fullish breath in, notice where it goes. Does it go more to the belly, the chest? Where does it go? Okay. Forget all about it and have a stand up. Now I can see most of you. There are a few of you with the videos off. That might be by choice or might be a technical issue. Like I said, there's plenty of time at the end for questions, but if you've got any burning questions or something doesn't make sense as we go along, pop your hand up and I'll unmute you and we can explore it briefly then. Okay. As you're standing there, notice if there's a bias to the weight without changing anything, without trying to assume any particular posture. Because what we're after is to start noticing how we're organizing unconsciously while we're distracted doing other things. So is there a bias to the weight, left or right? Toes or heels? Instep, outside edge? And it's not, we're not looking to correct it if there is. It's just to notice it. Okay. So we'll be exploring some of the common reflexive patterns that we work with in clinical somatics. But before we do, we'll just loosen the juices a little bit. So bring the hands up in front of the chest, and it's not a hard press. All the joints are nice and comfortable. The fingers are a little bit soft. The wrist is a little bit soft. The elbows. And I'll do this in mirror image. So you're going to keep the head looking forward. And let's take the left hand. Is this going to work if I do it? Yeah. Just around to where is comfortable, not where you can force it to, but where you could hang out there for a little while. Okay. Now turn the head to see where the hand's pointing, just so you can get a gauge, a little point that you can remember. Okay. And then bring the hand back. This time, as you sweep the same hand around, follow the thumb with the eye and the head. So let the eye and the head turn to follow the hand, and notice if that's changed where you've got to. So we're still with the left hand, and then back. And then one more time, same with the left hand, follow the thumb with the eye and the head. Now keep the hand there, but bring the head back to center. Okay. Now you're going to swap it over so the hand comes back to center as the head goes around to the left. So they're going in opposing directions. And then swap it over again. And one more time. And then let the arms down, let the shoulders have a little rest. Again. Now I'm going to do a funny little movement with the feet, and that's going to be turning just at the ankles, and it's just a little, and you're going to flick the weight to the outside edge of the left foot, inside edge of the right foot. So it's not a big shimmy with the pelvis. It's just a little at the feet and the ankles. They just do that. Just a couple of times, nice and easy. Okay. Now you're going to turn the head to the left, but the eyes are going to go to the right. And see if you can do it without sticking your tongue out in concentration. And then the head comes back to center, the eyes go to the left. So they're swapping over. Okay. Now bring the hands back up, bring everything back to center. Take a nice breath and a sigh. Okay. Now you're going to take the left hand around again, follow it with the thumb and the eyes, but this time with the eyes closed. So the hand sweeps and you follow it, but with the eyes closed. Come back around, keep the eyes closed. Now imagine a torch sticking out of the breastbone. And as you sweep the arm and the head, so you sweep the beam of the torch around as well. And back around. And release the arms down. Anybody notice a difference in range? Right. Okay. A surprising difference? Yeah. Okay. So the only difference from your first version to what you just did was that you included more of yourself. But most of the time we operate in very habitual ways. So if you bring the arms back up, sweep the arm around, follow it with the eye and the head, let the belly turn, let the chest turn. Notice what you're turning circles like now. And then come back and stop at your original limit. That point where you took that original gauge. And notice just how limited that is in comparison to where you can go. And if you choose to now with ease, you can go back to your new open limit. Okay. Release the arms, give them a little shimmy. Okay. Let's swap that over to the other side. Bring the hands up. And take the right hand around on its own and see where it gets to. And then bring it back. Follow it with the eye and the head this time. Leave the arm there, bring the head back to center. And then swap them over so the hand comes back as the head goes round. And then swap it over again. So no force or strain, just easy, gentle movement. Okay, release the arms. And now take the head to look up, but the eyes to look down. And then as you take the head down, the eyes look up. Notice if you can do that smoothly. Notice if you favor it leading with the head or the eyes. Bring it back to center. Then we're going to go back to the feet. And that little shimmy of the weight. So you'd be going to the outside edge of the right foot, inside edge of the left, and then back down. So it's not a big movement. It's nothing dramatic. Okay. Close the eyes. And simply imagine the movement. Imagine bringing the arms up in front of the chest. Imagine the hand sweeping around, followed by the eye, the head, the breastbone, the belly, the knees, the ankles, the feet. And imagine it coming back to center. Now this time actually do the movement, so bring the hands up. And then with the eyes closed, nice and easily sweep the hand, follow with all the other bits. Include as much of yourself as you're able. Open the eyes, see where you've got to. So the head goes around to follow the hand. That's it. And come back around. And drop the arms. Anybody experience a change that side as well? Yeah, maybe less dramatic than the first side, because you already employed some of the understanding, but there was still, without any force or strain, there was still improvements to be had. So let's join those two together, bring the hands up. And sweep the left hand around. Use all of the pieces of the chain. Make it easeful. And then come back around. And then it's just like passing the baton. They just have a little kiss and off they go around the other side. And then back, and it touches. So just at your own pace, alternate, send it back and forth. You can do it with the eyes open, the eyes closed, whichever feels nicest. Okay, and come back to center. Give the shoulders a little shimmy. Nice breath and a sigh. Take a nice full breath and notice if there's any difference to when you tested the breath earlier on. If it's any fuller, any shallower, hitting different parts. Okay. So ordinarily, we operate in a range that we can see. We've got a very heavy forward bias, but we've got a lot of other options available for us if we just remember to coordinate well. Okay. So we wouldn't necessarily choose to be uncoordinated, but we do build up tensions and tendencies just through living, just through responding to life. We can't have a thought or an emotion without having a physical contraction. It's hardwired into us. So whenever we are exposed to anything that might cause us fear, anxiety, tension, worry, nervousness, joy, anything that we're responding to, we tend to learn a certain way of responding to it. And then we just keep running that as a loop. It worked well enough once, so we just keep applying it, regardless of whether it's the most efficient way currently. Okay, so I'd like to explore kind of two fundamental reflex patterns that we have. And the first one is, you could sort of consider it our default setting. And when we're born, we're nothing but little flexor machines. We can cling on for food and cuddles, and that's about it until we learn our way into independent movement. Now, when we're exposed to anything that causes a need to protect, whether that's tiredness, illness, depletion, overwork, whatever it is, we tend to do this. We draw into center. Okay, so I'd like you to, let me just see if I can change my camera angle a second. Okay. So when that happens, we curl. So imagine there was a really sudden loud noise behind you. What would you do? You know, so go into that gradually and notice what you do. Notice where the tension builds. Notice that the inner thighs tend to grip. Toes might start to pigeon in a little. Now, if you were to take a couple of little steps in this position, as well as being a bit of comedy gold, it's sort of the classic shuffle of somebody really old and decrepit. So it's what we normally, come out of that because it's pretty horrible. What we normally would maybe assume is aging has got nothing to do with aging, but it's got everything to do with accumulating tension. So when we see people hunched over, they've just had a lot of experience in life that contracts over. Does that make sense? Yeah. Now that's a natural reflex to anything that if we read the latest horror story in the paper, and it might not be enough that we do this, but we might do a little bit of that. If you add to that then the tendency for laptop work and smartphones, TVs, there's this, and it's really, it's really commonly reported about the head forward posture. But what's really happening is it's happening from the center. Big, strong abdominal muscles tighten and pulls us in. The reason that the head does that and not that, this is an old brainstem response. But if we're there, if there's a real threat, we're more vulnerable. So we do that. So we can see where the danger is. That's getting into these guys on the neck and the shoulders, which is why when you're driving and laptop work and desk work, all of these just get knotted and knotted. So we rub these like crazy to try and release them, but this isn't where the problem is. It's being generated more centrally. Okay, so when we move efficiently, we move from the center out to periphery. And you can see that very obviously in the dance world and martial arts world. But all of our responses to stress tighten us in the gut to start with. Which is why, alongside anxiety, there's a lot of digestive issues. There's lots of issues in this area. Now, it has a direct influence on the breath as well. So go into that shape and notice that the belly tightens a little bit. You might be holding in the groin. There might be bracing in the knees. But try to take a breath and notice if it's easier on the inhale or the exhale while you're in this shape. So notice it's actually quite tricky to take a nice easy in breath, but it's very conducive to breathing out. Yeah. So this is also the shape of someone with chronic depression. Can't take an inhale, can't take in anything new. So if you change the word depression to compression, it's a different slant on it. Okay. If this force is drawing us forward, the only thing that's stopping me face planting now is effort in the back of the body acting as a restraint. That's the only thing that's stopping me face planting. So then I'm stuck. This is being generated, and this then is acting in restraint. So if, as a society, we're fearful, and largely it's fear-based economics, fear-based politics, fear-based education, this is a sort of societal default. Yeah. So this is what we call the red light reflex. This is what stops us in our tracks. Okay. So paired with that, you might consider it its sort of its balancer is what we call the green light reflex, which is if you were to tighten the back and arch back, the arms tend to open out. The legs tend to splay out. So if in the red light reflex, this was your sort of classic old deer on a Zimmer frame, this might be your classic sort of sergeant major. Band your legs. Okay. Now in this position, so this is if this is going on, this is I'm going to get that job done. I'm going to get my deadline hit. You know, this is young lads squaring up to each other. This is, I'm going to do it even if it's wrong. This is excessive, but it's also if you have to see the children in the middle of the night or get to work when you're still a bit poorly. This is what gets you through. So it's not that either of them are a bad thing. They're totally natural patterns to have in place, and it's when they get stuck on, it becomes problematic. And then the muscles that are holding them in place keep the mindset in place. The mindset keeps the body in place. Okay, will that make all with me so far? Okay, not too many quizzical faces. That's good. Okay, so I'd like you to spend just a little bit of time now. We'll only be a minute or so. To start with, we're going to go into this position, and I'd just like you to have a little wander around the room and notice if it brings any certain types of thought or mood. So you're just wandering around. And notice the speed that you've happened to move at. In my workshops, this is the best bit because it looks like a zombie apocalypse. Okay. And then come back out. So notice where strain started to build up. Okay, so some great comments from Joe. Felt constrained, slow, short of breath. Okay. Now see how it feels to employ this shape and have a wander around. And again, notice if it brings any emotion, any thought, any flavor to how you feel. And notice if it's changed the speed that you happen to be wandering around, or the speed of your movement. Okay, come back to center. Now we're going to, just in standing, you're going to oscillate between the two. And I'd like you to go, first of all, into your biggest version of this red light reflex. And whether the hands come up or down or wherever they go, it doesn't matter. It's your version of it. Okay, so your biggest version of that, and then come back out. And you come through neutral, through center, and go the other way. So your biggest version of opening out. So this is the back tightening, the front lengthening. And then come back out. Okay. Now I'd like you to do the smallest version of each of them that you can get away with and still class it as a movement. So it might be just the tiniest hint of it, but notice how you tighten and where you tighten. Because most of the time we're not in an elaborate version of it, but we're in some percentage of it. And very often it's a combination. It's not one or the other. We're locked in a sort of fight between them. Okay, take a nice breath and a sigh. And grab your chair. And I'm just going to see if I can position it so you can see my legs. So when we come to sitting, very often chairs are not ideal height for anyone. They claim to be ergonomically designed, but I'm not quite sure who for. So very often we'll tend to sit with the feet back or wrapped around a chair or cross-legged because we're just not comfortable. So I'd like you to sit far enough forward so you're not having to rely on the backrest. Okay. Ideally, if it's possible, have a little cushion on the chair so that your hips are slightly above the knees. So you're just slightly elevated. Okay. Now, I'd like you to take the feet slightly forward so that you've got a wider than 90-degree angle at the back of the knee. So you're creating a little pocket of space there. And as a consequence, that allows the angle at the ankle to open up as well. Okay. Take a few nice breaths with the eyes open to start with. And then I'd like you to slide the feet back so you tighten the angle in the knees. And take a few nice full breaths again and see how they compare. Slide the feet back out again. And you want the legs comfortably apart. It's all about creating space. And particularly for women, that's encouraged to be demure and ladylike, but it's actually tight and constrained. So have a nice, comfortably unladylike distance between the knees and nice comfortable space behind the knees and at the ankles. Okay. If you now adopt what we're all told is a slump, which really is that red light reflex that we explored in standing. And if you place the hands inside the knees and give the knees a little press, you'll find a tension building maybe in the belly, maybe in the chest, maybe the back of the neck. Now gradually release that and let yourself come back to center. Let the arms dangle. Roll the pelvis so you round the lower back. So that slump is nothing but a contraction. So exaggerate it so you can recognize it. And then gradually release it. And as you release this central tension, so the pelvis can just dip forward a little. And if you continue to dip the pelvis forward, all of a sudden you arch the back. And if you release the effort in the back, the pelvis can release back to center. So what we're told normally is this is a slump, this is labeled as bad. Teacher or the boss walks in, and we hike ourselves up. You can only maintain that until the back muscles tire, and this original force then is still going on. So if we can recognize it for what it is, we can do something with it. Because it is nothing but us. Okay. So what I'd like you to do now is to go into this red light shape, your biggest version of it within sitting, and let the knees sneak towards one another. Tighten the back of the neck to look up. Notice how that feels. Notice how it feels to try to take a breath there. And then come out of it. Let the knees and the inner thighs soften. Let the pelvis tip forward a little bit. And that pelvis tipping you forward just gives you a natural little uplift, rather than having to yank yourself out of it. Now we're going to go into that green light reflex. To the biggest version of it. And then come out of it. Now just with the pelvis, it's just going to roll forward and back. And you'll find that your height will just change as a result of influencing things from center. Okay. Now I'd like you to do your littlest version of that red light shaping. That was startle response. So it could just be enough that it tightens the rib cage, for instance. And then your littlest version going the other way, into the green light reflex. Okay. Come to center. Take a nice breath and a sigh. So we can employ this within a meditation context. So a lot of meditation techniques center around staying somewhere close to center, but then the thoughts go off in a bit of a loop, and they tend to loop in the same way. And we notice we've gone and come back. You notice you've gone and you come back. But the thoughts will have a flavor to them, okay, by and large. So if the thoughts that are running on a loop are forward projected, what's next? What am I going to do? What session am I going to watch after this? What am I going to do next? Chances are that there'll be a little bit of this shape involved. So if you rather than a lot of my meditation training has been in the Zen tradition, which is you don't really do anything with the thoughts, you just watch them come and go and see them for what they are. But this is a different approach where you can actually utilize them. So if you can recognize that there's a flavor to it, and you can recognize that you're actually keeping that thought process locked in by physical means as well. If you can recognize it, you can do it a little bit more to exaggerate it, and then you can let it go. Then you come back to center with the thought loop and with the physical frame as well. Likewise, if you're there might be thoughts might be mulling things over from the past, regret, whatever it is. But if you can recognize it, you can do it a little bit more to exaggerate it, to take control of that aspect of yourself, what's happening unconsciously, bring it back into the conscious realm. So what we're going to do now, does that all make sense? Great. Okay. So I realize that's quite a lot of information, but we're going to put it into practice now, just for 5 or 10 minutes. And I'll set a little timer. So what I'd like you to do is, whether you either eyes open or eyes closed, whichever you're more comfortable with, set yourself up with a comfortable position to start with on the chair. So not leaning into the backrest, and finding a happy angle for the knees and the ankles. Nothing really needs to hold in the shoulders. Okay, so you're not looking to lock into a rigid posture and hold it the whole time. You're looking to be comfortable and movable. Yeah. The idea is that you're just going to follow the breath in and out. When you realize that you're no longer doing that and you're focusing on something else, notice where the direction and the flavor of that thought. And notice if it coincides with either this red light or this green light or a physical tension that you can exaggerate and let go. Okay. So let's do that now. So we're going to settle in just for 5 or 10 minutes. Okay, hopefully this timer will sound. Take a nice breath and a sigh. So when you notice the flavor of the thoughts, do something with it and then release it. Okay. Take a nice breath and a sigh. Take some nice fullish breaths and see if they're any different to when you took a breath earlier. Okay, make any movements that you feel like making. Okay, so I'll open it up for comments and questions. What I'll try first is I'll take everybody off mute, and whoever shouts first gets first question. Where are we? Who's
Tony?
Tony, how you doing? Okay, hang on, Tony. I think I'll mute everybody and I'll put you back on.
Or we can take control ourselves, maybe. I've been advised that's the best way.
There we go then. I'll go with that.
I heard, you know, and it seems to work. Yeah. So I've just unmuted myself now.
There we go then, Tony. Okay.
Just wanted you to, what was the exercise that you asked us to do? Just ask you to reaffirm that so I can match my findings against the instructor.
Just a second. I'm just going to see if I can get some headphones. My speaker is a little bit muffled.
I'm not so sure it's your speaker. I think it's the same.
For everyone, is it? Oh, okay.
My hearing is fine as well. My hearing is fine, so I don't know.
I'm not sure what the question was, sorry.
Could you just reiterate what the instructions were that we had to do? What was the instruction that you gave us to do?
Okay. Okay. So the principles are that in the meditation, when there's thoughts that are taking you off on a loop, they've got a flavor and a shape to them, as well as it just being considered as a mental construct.
Right, okay, yeah.
So if you notice that the thoughts are continually taking you away time after time,
yeah,
then there'll be a shape to it, which means that you can engage with that shape, right, and release it, which will change what's happening, because it's not like the mind influences the body or vice versa. It's the same thing.
Yeah, it's
we just spot one before the other.
Right, okay. Okay, fine. Thank you.
There we go. Okay. Okay, so any other there we go, Sandra. Let me just unmute you. There we go.
Can you hear me?
I can perfectly.
Great. It was just an observation. I had really suddenly realized this tiny subtle movement forward and backwards. When I meditate, I often have a pain in my lower back, like in my upper back, in the chest area. And it comes on, and I just noticed in that very simple exercise how it's when I'm trying to avoid pain of my thought, a thought that brings pain to me or concern, I'm trying to push it away. And I just suddenly realized that my chest goes forward in this moment, really subtly, and then I hold it. So it's like a shield. And I think it was the same thing as when we're walking around, this pinned feeling I felt, like pinned against something. But it was very subtle to notice it's around a thought that I'm trying to protect myself from feeling. And I hadn't really considered that. And I thought that's very powerful to kind of just so quickly to have this sudden sense of actually that's what's playing out in that tiny movement where the chest is going forward. rather than the curling in. So I think I found it's so subtle, isn't it? And but it's really clear, a really beautiful practice, I think, to be noticing that much more closely around the thoughts and where they are actually playing out forward and back. And I know about the future, you know, I've often fallen forward when I'm thinking about the future, but it's so I just wanted to share that observation for me. The other one thing I did have was, what is this thing that I get often when you asked us to put our eyes upwards and our head down? I mean, that's so hard to do. I found that really, really hard. But I also, what happened to me is I started to do that. I had got real nausea, like a real, this is common. Yeah. This is okay.
What's going on is, and the nub of the clinical somatic work is to identify where we're habitually holding tensions. Okay. Now we can operate very reflexively with everything launching at things or protecting or whatever combination. And we can have independent use of all of the voluntary muscles. The eyes being a set of muscles, and they're actually independent from one another. So that's how you can go cross-eyed. Yeah. But what we tend to do is, particularly in the age of getting a lot of information from screen, we tend to get our information in a very fixed way. So the eyes then become locked to the muscles of the jaw, the face, the scalp, the neck, the shoulders, belly, to very subtle degrees with some of the muscles. It might be 1 or 2% in the belly muscles, for instance, that you'd never sense unless you were very, very adept at it, but it's there, you know. So when the reason that initial movement changed your ranges of movement was because it was disrupting the habitual way that you lock movement. So when you challenge that, all of a sudden, and that's very, the eyes and the balance mechanism are intimately connected. So we can, when that gets challenged or we over egg it a little bit, it triggers the nausea. It's like seasickness. Yeah. You know, but the more you do it, the finer you can regulate it, and the less that effect takes place.
Right.
It's largely why things like balance becomes an issue when people get older. And again, it's not necessarily to do with aging, but it is to do with an accumulation of habituated tension.
Yeah.
Does that answer
that makes complete sense. Yeah. Thank you.
So we are about to run out of time, but I'm very happy to stay online to take some more questions if you want to. If not, you can email me. But who is? There you go. Victoria, and then Pauline.
Yeah, I just wanted, that's quite fascinating, and thank you very, very much for a really good session. I haven't come across, I've done lots of yoga and stuff, but I haven't come across Thomas Hanna and this work. Are there any books or resources you can recommend for us just to find out more?
What's the best way for me to get the information to you? You can either send me an email and I can send it to you. If you put in Amazon Thomas Hanna, he's got 2 or 3 really good books. My teacher Martha Peterson has got a really good set of resources available as well. I'll have a word with Robert and see if I can post a set of resources to the forum on the Middleway website as well. But it's largely unheard of. But it's in the same pedigree and lineage as Alexander Technique, Feldenkrais. Okay. Pauline.
Well, can I just reiterate appreciation for the pace, particularly of the. I mean, I felt there was kind of co-regulation going on. You were helping us to regulate our systems by the calm sort of way that you spoke, and I really appreciated that. I thought the practices were very subtle, but my question was actually, how does this relate to Feldenkrais? Because I see some similarities between some Feldenkrais methods that I've seen before.
Okay, so in a really very, very snapshot potted history. Alexander was an actor, had problems with his performances, went to the doctors. They said there was nothing they could do for him. So he started doing his, and apologies for any Alexander technique teachers amongst you. I'm brutalizing the whole story a little bit. But what he realized was he was doing this. So he started doing his performances in front of a mirror, and he realized that when he changed his shape, the whole thing changes. Feldenkrais then was in a similar position. He had problems with his knees. The prognosis was that he'd end up in a wheelchair. He was very stubborn, wasn't having any of that. He heard about Alexander, went to study with Alexander, and realized that it wasn't just about upright carriage or ease, that it was a much more physically global affair. Thomas Hanna, however, was a professor of philosophy and a boxer, which are not very obvious bedfellows, but he was in physically good shape. But he was interested in how can you live as full a life as possible. Yeah. And he recognized that you can't live a full life if you're harboring physical, emotional, psychological tensions. So his exploration was, well, how do you improve things? Whereas Feldenkrais and Alexander were looking about, to a degree, how do you remedy things? So Thomas Hanna, right place, right time. It was when lots of advances were being made in neuroscience. Realized that it was the nervous system calling the shots in relation to reflexive patterns. And then how do you recreate autonomy and self-authorship? So does that answer the question?
Yes, totally. Thank you so much. And you've given me an avenue to pursue.
Great. Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
I can, yep.
Yeah. I'm a happy yoga teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And many years ago, about 20 years ago, I came across this school of yoga or classification of yoga called Somatic Yoga. And I've always been interested in that stuff. And it's something that I want to look at. So can you elaborate on that? Can you say something about somatic yoga in that context? Or
Okay, so there is a difference between, or differentiation. So Thomas Hanna coined the phrase somatics in terms of your lived experience of being you. Okay, so it's your felt sense of being you. Somatics as a phrase could mean anything to anyone, and in the dance world, somatic dance is about free expression. Don't let anything get in the way in exploring methodologies for that. Somatic yoga, arguably, all of yoga in its traditional sense of why you're doing it in the first place is a very somatic process. You know, you're striking an unusual position in order to find out, to ask the question, am I comfortable there? Why, if I can't move in a certain range, why can't I move in a certain range? Is it because I'm holding the breath? Okay, why am I holding the breath? Is it because I'm anxious? But it's a little bit now, it's kind of come from obscurity a little bit, but it's a little bit now, almost its own cliche. It's like everything is somatic flavored, somatic infused, the same as mindfulness. You know, the phrase the mindfulness of the workplace or whatever it is, you know, and it could mean anything to anybody. But in this regard, because it's based on these reflexive principles that Thomas Hanna, it sits in a unique place. It's got a framework. It's very tangible. There's elements of these reflexes that we can explore and play with and learn how to take control of again. Sorry, I muted you.
So, the yoga is a tradition, a yogic path towards, and then the somatic is also, but actually, yoga has a somatic flavor. Yeah.
It depends how it's done. It depends.
They come together. They sort of
It depends how it's done, and it depends who's teaching it.
I got you.
You know,
I'm really
you could have yoga as a very somatic set of principles.
Yeah.
You could have yoga as a very gymnastic set of principles.
Yeah. Got you. Okay, thank you. Thank
You're
you so
welcome.
much. Yeah. One more thing. What martial arts?
Coming to you next, Robin.
Sorry, what martial arts was you doing beforehand? What martial
Have
arts?
I done?
Yeah, because I'm looking at your website, you see. So I'm not.
I've done did a lot of jiu-jitsu, judo, aikido.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm gonna go back there.
Okay. I'm going to jump over to Robin now.
So I read a good while back I think it was a study actually about the link between the psoas muscle and I've done some sort of investigating of that muscle and exercising it in the way that I wake up. I do it before I go to bed.
Mm-hmm.
And the link, I think in the paper, was linking it to mental health and a non-exercise muscle is linked to declining or worse mental health, and a well-developed muscle, and that those body postures are linked to better mental health. I was just wondering if you'd heard anything about that, what your thoughts were.
I have heard that, and it's a great line of inquiry. I don't think it's complete. That muscle, everybody. The problem is that it gets considered from the same way that people learn anatomy, which is that there's a defined muscle. It starts here, ends there, it does this. Mm. It's got a distinct function. Mm. Okay, whereas arguably the psoas muscle, we'll take that as an example, is at the epicenter of this whole pattern.
Right.
Okay. Now, from a physiotherapy perspective, an inability for that muscle to be sensed or engaged with or to be utilized would be considered that there's a weakness. So you have to do something to strengthen it, which is kind of the Western way. If there's a problem, force will get you out of it. Just do more of it.
Yes.
You know? But very often, if this is engaged constantly, so for instance, someone with chronic anxiety, depression, if this is constantly engaged, it might not be weak, it's just fatigued.
But that in itself isn't the problem.
No, it's part of it.
It's part of the problem.
Yeah, but that's if you then try to, if this is happening and this is overly tight in that region and how it connects, because it's never just one muscle. Muscles they only exist on their own in anatomy books. In real life, they're connected to everything else through their connective tissue.
So how does that link with another idea I recently heard about, or another system actually, which is is it fascia system?
Yeah.
Does that link as well? Because
yes.
that connects to everything, doesn't it? That's like a layer of tissue in between the muscles and links our whole.
It links over the muscles, it links through the muscles, it links to the bone, it links to the skin, it links to the arteries. It's like this shirt. If I pull this shirt from anywhere, it's going to have an influence everywhere. It's not the anatomical viewpoint. Well, it's that thread, you pull that thread. Whereas this is, the whole thing is pulling tight. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you can't just work on one muscle. So the fascia would be an inclusion all the way through to thought processes. If you're trying to employ these muscles without consideration of everything, then all you're doing is using more of what you're ordinarily doing. So you're using more of the habit, which tightens you up even more. So what happens with fascia kind of putting it crudely, when muscles are doing a certain function, if they're doing it over and over again, whether that's postural habit, workplace habit, anything that you're doing over and over again, at some point they're going to get fatigued. So the fascia then, instead of it being this lovely sort of flossy, free moving suppleness, starts to harden and it starts to build up collagen. So it takes some of the load off the muscle. So when you go for a massage and they find really big knots, by and large, it's not the muscle fibers, it's the fascia that's started to adhere, to create this stronger bond. You could consider it almost like scar tissue. Until the loading is taken off. Yeah. When the loading is taken off and you move in non-habitual ways, then the suppleness can start to reinstate itself. You know? But that relies on you changing something. If you're always doing something in the same way, you'll build up a capacity to be able to endure that. And for most of us, by and large, it's unnecessary and unhelpful.
Yeah.
Does that help to answer that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's just a little side issue that I was thinking about. Yeah. But to go back to a little point in the session, we can't have a thought or an emotion without physical contraction, and all the physical contractions have an emotive quality as well. They're the same thing. It's not like one leads to the other in a cause and effect link. No,
it's like having a coin. There's a heads and tails there the whole time, but it just depends which one you spot first.
Yeah, I find in meditation when I'm thinking of something to do with the future, my head comes up. And then to center myself, I can bring it down. And if I'm thinking about something, my head tends to go down. I've noticed that in the past. So yeah.
So now you can start to think of that include more of yourself.
Yeah, and use it cognitively as well to help with the process. Yeah, really good. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Cheers.
Any other comments or questions, Hannah?
Yeah. No, thank you very much. That was really useful. That's really helpful. It's very interesting for me, because my background is I've meditated for like 10 years, and what I was thinking was, if I'd been taught and the somatic element of meditation had been integrated right from the beginning when I was taught meditation, it would have been a game changer. Because what actually happened in my case was, I used to get into meditation posture and be taught, okay, get into meditation posture, and as long as you can stay there for however long, 20, 30, 45 minutes, that's the most important thing, and not get in pain. And then what I used to do was basically, just because I had some trauma issues, completely dissociate, and then go off into up here and go off into wonderful states of whatever. So completely nothing was happening down there. So and then I actually, so after about 10 years of meditation, I actually completely went to 180 and started doing trauma release therapy, somatic experiencing therapy, and this is really interesting for me, because it's like it was coming full circle again. So I started meditating again recently, this was a really good link for me to try and start building those bridges again between. Because what put me off going back to meditation again was I was being worried that I would sit down and then just check out again. So this was actually really useful for me to get some new tools about how to integrate that, and how to use what's happening in my body as part of meditation. So I just really want to thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Sounds like it was the perfect timing.
Can I ask a question? Can you hear me? Okay. So one of the things that occurred to me was we're talking about the impact of stress on the body, and I'm curious about whether maternal stress when a child is in the womb, and then distress in infancy, might impact on issues like dyslexia and dyspraxia, and whether at a very early age with young children, if we were to get them involved in somatic therapy, whether that could actually, well, for want of a better word, heal those conditions or improve those conditions.
The honest answer is I don't know.
Okay.
But my assumption would be that yes, it's the same in the same principles as people, as certain individuals with some learning disabilities or difficulties. It comes with certain physical clumsiness as well. So like with the bow bath techniques and learning different coordination skills helps to bring the intelligence, as is measured, back up to or closer to a par with a peer group, for instance. So there's a whole, the reasons for those conditions could be many and numerous. Okay. So to say that if you took this approach, it would help that, I can categorically state that, but it would certainly be a very valuable piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I speak as someone who was so dyspraxic as a child. I couldn't ride a bike till I was 10. I couldn't tie my own shoelaces. Fine academically, but the clumsiest person in the world. But actually yoga has had a huge impact on my level of dyspraxia. I'm not sure many people now, well, not that people look out for it, but it would probably not even be noticeable now, but that's right, through doing yoga. But I think this, as a treatment model, I'd really love to explore it, actually.
Well, please do get in touch with any more questions. I'll get my contact details put on the forum.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm more than happy to explore that much further.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. It's been a great workshop. Thank you.
Ah, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Tony? Hi there.
Yeah. Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, brilliant. Yes, just a quick one, because I know we've gone over time. It's just my question up there. I seem to spend most of my time trying to get to this place where I can rest, and I never get there. And I'm always in a state of rushing around. It's almost like this place that I'm in is never good enough. It's always in the future somewhere. Any thoughts on that? Does that mean anything to you?
Yep, that's this pattern in action.
Yeah.
Maybe not to this physical extent, but a bit of it. It's born out of constantly being told you have to strive to achieve. You've got to work hard. You've got to get there. Otherwise, you're useless. You're lazy, and all these other subtexts that come in. So we're constantly, the whole sort of capitalist model is based on more. What's next? What's next? Never being satisfied with what's now. So this is, now interestingly, this was Thomas Hanna, the founder of this work. This was the bulk of his work. He was active in the 80s. He developed the work in the 70s and 80s. Unfortunately, he died in a car crash in the early 90s. But the majority of the cases he was seeing in clinic was chronic bad back, cardiovascular issues as well, because there's a constant thrust forward, and that was America of the age. Whereas he died before the advent of laptops and things. So I think now what he'd see would be a much more fear, anxiety-based mental health issues, digestive issues, reproductive issues. Yeah. But it's a fight. So it depends. We've given all of these messages come in through the education system, without any malice, but through families as well. Nobody wants their children to do well, but sometimes that's over-egged as well. So if this is constantly there, and you don't know that you're self-generating it,
Yeah.
that brings its own frustration as well.
So, I mean, many a time I recognize that I'm tense, and I make an effort to relax those muscles, but then they return pretty fast, you know, they kind of sneak up on you. Is there any way of, I don't know, keeping the state of mind that it's okay to be here in this moment, almost to tell myself, I'm here, I've arrived, it's fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no, it'd be nice if there was a magic button and we could just, like, there's no instant shortcut. However, if you can recognize that you're self-generating that, and you do it, so that in the clinical setting, it's a hands-on modality. So I get people to move, and I'll add a little bit of resistance so they can feel what they're not currently feeling. It's not what you can feel, it's what's behind it that you can't feel. That is the problem.
What you're kind of not, you're trying not to feel in a sense.
It could be that you're trying not to feel it if there's trauma involved, or it could be that it's, particularly if it's in the back, we've got such a forward bias that we're ill practiced in sensing the back, and neurologically we've not got as much real estate dedicated to it. Right. But so if with tension, there's sort of the common way of, there's two common ways of trying to deal with it. One is trying to tell yourself to relax, or the other is trying to stretch it out. Yeah. But it's much more efficient to engage with it. So if you feel tension, it's a bit counterintuitive, but make it more tense. Create a shape, use it, so you can recognize that it's actually you doing it to yourself, with yourself.
Right, I see. Yeah.
Then you've got something to let go of, and you can diminish it past where, because all that's happening is you're relaxing it and then it's springing back to what was the normal. Whereas if you engage with it, it's a little bit like the handbrake of a car. You pull the lever up and have to press the button to release it off the whole way. Then all of a sudden you've got a different operational range, which means you can spot the tension building a little bit sooner. You can nip it in the bud a little bit sooner.
That's brilliant. That's great. Thank you. Thanks very much for that.
You're welcome. Hi, Joe. Did you have a question, Joe?
No, I didn't actually.
Oh. you just unmuted.
Oh, have I? Sorry. I'll mute myself again. I beg your pardon. Actually, I do have a question.
I knew it.
So yes, actually, I do have a question. So at the moment, I am recovering from having had COVID-19. I'm grateful that I didn't have it more severely, but it's left me feeling that I'm on the mend, but every couple of days I have a day of complete fatigue and slight breathlessness. And clearly you do not know my voice, but I can tell as I'm speaking to you now that my voice is coming from here. It's sort of coming from just below the top of my collarbones. So I'm interested in if there was a particular somatic exercise or breathing practice that you might recommend that would aid in my recovery from this.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's one of those yes and no answers. Yes, but not any one particular. There would be a sequence of explorations to release it, because again, it's not one cause. You know, there will be levels of inflammation from the virus. There will also be levels of tension created from the fear of the virus that was in place before, then the fear of having to deal with it and all of the stress and anticipation of that. So it's not solely the result of the virus, it's everything that comes packaged with that on every level. So there's there would be sequences. that sits in the clinical realm, which you know, we could run sessions. I run sessions online. Well, after now anyway. But so
okay,
that's something
thank you.
That's something that we could explore, but it's
too big a question probably for now. So, but thank you. I'll contact you about that. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
I'll mute myself now.
Okay. So we have horribly overrun, so I apologize if I've kept you from a cup of tea or another interesting session. So if there are no more final questions or comments, I'll draw it to a close. Thank you very much for your time, and please do get in touch with any questions. Hope to see you soon. Take care.